Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.wordpress.com. And today, for this episode, it's going to be a great episode because I have a very special guest back with me on the show, someone who has not been on the show for, I think it's been about a year and a half, Mr. Peter Rios.
Hey, Eric, how are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I'm so glad, Peter, that you could come back on the show.
Hey, happy to be here. Although you said this episode's going to be great. That's a lot of pressure. We got to live up to that now.
Oh, come on. Don't be so modest, Peter.
No. Too kind. You're too kind.
So everyone can find, if you don't know Peter, and I can't imagine why not, I've mentioned him enough on the show that people should check him out if you're not familiar with him, but you should go check out his website, thedailyrios.com, where he has episodes of his own podcast, The Daily Rios, as well as posts to the website. And that's where you're getting the daily part of the Daily Rios these days, aren't you, Peter?
Trying to, yeah. The second year of the first year was a daily podcast, Monday through Friday, anywhere from 10 seconds long to an hour long, depending on whatever the topic was. And then in the second year, I wanted to incorporate the daily aspect to the website as well. So it didn't have to be a podcast every day, Monday through Friday. It could be some other thing. And, it's a slow build, and I'm trying to experiment with some things. And then, of course, during the holidays, things get busy. So with this new year, I thought, all right, I'll just post, something every day. And right now I'm just backdating a lot of the stuff just to catch up. But and I have to get one podcast out in January because my record there for a while, I think, was like one in November, one in December. So I have to get at least one in January.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just throwing up stuff on the website. If people see it, great. If not, it amuses me. And at the end of the day, I do it because I like to do this. So, that's enough reason for me.
Yeah, of course. But I will, Peter, I have to put in my 2 cents here, as Ryan Sanyo did not too long ago, to call for you to put out some more podcasts.
Yeah.
Talk about pressure.
Yes, I know. No. And I have some plans and I have some things that I'm working on. So it will definitely happen. I'll say that.
That's good. You doing that daily, the Monday through Friday podcast, that just impressed the hell out of me that you're able to do that. And I know, like you said, some of them were really short and some of them were longer, but still to come up with stuff every day to put out there, I was amazed. And I felt a little inadequate, shall we say, because at best I do like 2 episodes a month. So.
Well, I mean, a lot of it really was just, we all sort of think about things during the day, right? Because that when I was doing that first year and it incorporated everything, not just comics, but theater and my life and my girlfriend, my family, whatever, we all have things that we think about. And in essence, podcasting was exactly that early on in the earliest of stages. It was just, I had this thought and I'm going to record about it. And if somebody hears it and they listen, great. The whole idea of podcasts with specific topics didn't really kick off right away in the early days of podcasting, right? There weren't, you couldn't just find a Star Trek podcast or a gardening podcast. It was really people just talking about everything. And then eventually, the whole topic-specific thing started to kick in. But so that's kind of what I based that first year on. And the downside to it, though, is because I don't have that schedule, I get real lazy now. So I don't want it. I don't want a podcast, or I think of something and I wind up just talking about it on Twitter or to someone else. You know what I mean? So without having those restrictions of doing it once a day, I've sort of freed myself, but it's kind of backfired on me a little bit.
Well, the freeing yourself comment, I kind of noticed that in you talking. I think you talked about it on a specific episode earlier in the year, at some point last year you were talking about this, and I could just I could kind of tell in your voice that you seem kind of relieved that you didn't have to do that every day. Did I misread that, or?
Well, probably by the end there, I was, just trying to come up with some stuff because it was the middle of the summer at the end of the year, and I was probably distracted by too many other things. And I was glad I did it, and it was an interesting challenge, and there were some really good highs and some lows, but that's always going to be the case when you're just trying to do something, I think, and something creative, I should say. But yeah, by the end of it, I was like, oh, I can't wait. I got to stop this daily thing. It's going to be too much. It's hard. It's hard. People who do it, well, I mean, there's probably people out there that get paid to do it, and they have producers that are able to give them research material. They have they don't have to worry about editing and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, all to say, it was a great experiment, and who knows, maybe for the third year I'll do it again. But right now I'm enjoying my lazy schedule.
Well, let's talk about that for a bit, if you don't mind. So last time we got together and talked, we talked a lot about your theater work, and I think I can't remember, were you starting to do the teaching at that point, or?
Yeah, if it was, oh, no, I was already almost a year into the teaching.
Okay, yeah. So what else is going on in your life that you wanted to talk about here?
Oh, well, still teaching more classes now. Developed a nice little TAP program at the university I work with. Also working on creating, we've already had one of these, a theater convention. I was talking to the woman that I work with in the production company that I work with, and talking about all these conventions I go to, comic book conventions, and thinking, how can we steer that into something theatrical, something performing arts based. Certainly there are tons of dance competitions, but we wanted to stay away from competitions as a whole and make it more about the education. And we created a weekend intensive training program for 7th through 12th graders. And we had one in November, and we're having another one in March here in the greater Philadelphia area. And our eventual plan is to grow it and make it bigger and bigger and go elsewhere in the country and do it. Because we have a nice core of teachers from local theaters, from Broadway. We have people that have worked in a whole bunch of different universities, schools, television, commercials, etc. Composers. When we looked at the people around us, our colleagues that we've worked with for years, we found that we have a ton of resources, so we should be using that. And it was a great event for the first program. We had about 100 kids, and it took off, and they're all excited about the next one. So that's kind of the next big venture that I'm working on.
Wow.
It's pretty incredible. It's something that if I was a kid at this and I was offered a chance to do something like that, I would do everything I could to take it. Because it's something different than just high school drama, which is a great start. But now here's a program that could help you push forward if you want to do something professionally, locally, or if you want to go to college and you need some immediate feedback and help on college auditions. So it's a fairly exciting adventure, and it's starting small, like all things, and hopefully it'll take off in the next couple of years.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
I'm always busy. I'm just too busy. I got too much going on.
Yeah, how do you find time in your day to do everything that you talk about that you do, like on Twitter and the posts that you make? And I can't imagine having the schedule that you do.
Well, I mean, I don't have a family, right? An immediate family. So that I know that takes up a lot of time with people who do, have wives, husbands, partners, kids, that takes up a good chunk, I have a girlfriend, but we don't live together, so I have time. I don't sleep much, and there are days, believe me, there are days when I do nothing but sit there on YouTube and watch cartoons. So I get distracted like the best of them. And I just powered through. Finally, after the third attempt, I finally powered through and finished Stephen King's The Stand, which is over 1,400 pages. And I think about a week and a half ago, or a week ago, I just was determined to finish it, and I've read about 600 to 700 pages in a couple days. And I know that's not like a major feat, but I said I had to do this. I have to sit here. I don't care how long it takes. I'm gonna finish this book.
Well, and you talk about too how you like to you want to get caught up. Like, if I'm gonna steer this back to comics a little bit here now. How you want to get caught up on DC stuff and or maybe some specific things that are more recent. But you like to go back to the past and read about. You talked about some of the Thanos stuff and in Marvel, and how you want to go all the way back to some early Avengers stuff and the Starlin stuff with Thanos and work your way up to the present.
Yeah, I was on a podcast called the Sunday Comics Podcast, which is part of Donnie Salvo is the main host on that, and I think it's part of. I think it's part of the Taylor Network. So it's a mix of podcasts by Daryl Taylor and Donnie Salvo and all these other guys. So anyway, we were talking about Marvel Now, and I said they asked if I was reading Infinity, but up to that point I wasn't caught up yet. And I said I made the mistake of going, Infinity by Jonathan Hickman. Maybe I should reread and finish reading his Fantastic Four run, because some of those elements might take place in Infinity. Oh, wait, but he also wrote the Dark Reign Fantastic Four miniseries that predates his Fantastic Four run. So let me read that. Well, then why don't I just read everything Hickman's done at Marvel? Well, wait a minute. Infinity's about Thanos. I've read some Thanos stuff. It's been a while. Why don't I go back and read, the Infinity Gauntlet, or go all the way back and read the stuff it's a sickness, Eric. It's just a sickness. I can't stop. It's because I want to put all this stuff together in my brain so I know where it all makes sense. I want to be my own personal Wikipedia page, but not as dry. I want it to make sense, and I want the connections, even if they're deliberate or not. I want those connections in my brain. So, yeah, that's why I can never catch up, because I keep going backwards, and it's a curse.
Well, like you said, how could you ever get caught up on things? You're starting to sound a little bit like Murd, I think.
Yeah, right. I mean, I usually always try to keep, and so does Murd, but I try to keep an awareness, at least. If I haven't read everything, at least there's a light awareness of what's going on currently. I don't know the specifics, but I know general thoughts of things. There's just so much out there, and it's just so much out there, and it's all good. And, thankfully the stuff we're talking about today is isolated. We can just sort of talk about it in itself.
Yeah.
It's not wrapped up in other stuff. And, I'm not saying that I dislike when it's wrapped up in other stuff. I do like it, but it's also nice to just kind of read something and go, great. It's only 5 issues we got to read. Perfect.
And so, yeah, like you said, we're going to be talking about, and I didn't mention this at the beginning of the show. We're going to talk about Lazarus and Rachel Rising. But before we move on to that, Peter, you mentioned before about the convention that you helped get started. But I wanted to ask you about, Comic-Cons. Do you have any plans of doing any Comic-Cons this year?
Yeah, I hope to. I'm feeling a need. I didn't do many in 2013, if any at all. I can't remember. And I'm just feeling like I want to get back in that environment again. What conventions do you go? I know you go to Emerald City when you can. Are there any others you've been to?
Well, there is something even more local called the Spokane Comic-Con. It's in Spokane, Washington, in Eastern Washington. It's not at all a big con. It's quite a very small con, but they have local people, and they brought in some folks from that have done some stuff for DC and Dark Horse in the past. So it's kind of nice, neat to go there and see that. And actually, in February of 2014, a couple local comic book shops that are in my area are putting together a teeny tiny little con that they're calling PaloosaCon, because the area that I'm from is called the Palouse. And so it's a one-day event that I probably will be going to because it's the first one. It's in my own backyard, so why not? But other than that, Emerald City is it for me. I'm not able to get out to the other cons that are around the country or even, somewhat in my region. So, but I will be going to Emerald City this year. It was kind of a last minute thing. We're actually going to be taking our granddaughters to see The Lion King, the traveling Broadway show version that is coming to Seattle. So it's there at the same time as Emerald City. So we thought, what the hell? Let's take them too.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's a nice little theater town in community in Seattle. But and when you go to those cons, I mean, don't you just walk in and go, this is awesome. Even if it's a small one, you got creators and you got comics that you can buy, or I'm not a big toy collector, but even I'll walk through those aisles just to look, and admire and whatever. It's fun, right? It's a fun thing that if you have a certain enjoyment in a hobby and that hobby is suddenly thrown all around you, I'm sure everybody knows that feeling. It's just a great feeling to walk into something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I felt the first year that I went to Emerald City. It was like, and Kirby Crackle has a song about this, right? I think it's called Coming Home or Home or something like that. But it felt like I was coming home. And it was an incredible, amazing experience. And if anybody out there who's listening has never been to a Comic-Con and you have an opportunity, I highly encourage you to try it out. It's just a lot of fun, and like you said, the shopping opportunities, and really now, Peter, that's why I like to go to the cons. Is to find the stuff that fills in, the gaps in my collection, and to discover, new and interesting things as well.
Right. And Emerald City is a great convention, what I look at as sort of like a mid-sized, but pushing its way to be a larger convention, if not almost even like a national convention, because the artist lists there is amazing, and it has been for a number of years. Top A-list creators go there, a great indie section, mid-list creators. It's a wonderful shopping, and it's run by comic fans. So that show is just great. And, I think some people get the idea that some conventions, they're probably just, flea market, glorified flea markets, and some of them are. But if I can buy comics 10 cents a piece, 25 cents, 50 cents, $1, I'm there. I'll do that. And then if it has all the other stuff, artists and creators and like-minded attendees and fun panels, that's just a bonus. And as someone who has sold a ton of comics out of his collection, I find a comfort in knowing that I can go to any convention and probably find a miniseries or part of a series that I sold and go, you know what, it's always going to be out there. I can read it whenever I want just by going to a convention. Maybe people don't have the luxury to do that, or they're too far, or they don't have the time. I understand that, and that's what the internet's for. But it's really great to, the one we have in Philly is a Wizard World show, and it's not the greatest, but if I want to go shopping, it's a perfect place to shop, because then I just hop on the subway and drop my books off at my apartment, so I love conventions for that aspect.
So Peter, do you, like you said, you sell off stuff from your collection, but do you ever go back and after you've sold something and realize, hey, I actually really want that, and then is that when you go to like the conventions and reacquire those things, or do you not just do that?
Oh no, I've done it. I've done it a bunch of times. I think in the 80s there was this, I think it was the late 80s, there was this 4-issue Amethyst miniseries. So Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, she was recently featured last year in the Sword of Sorcery book that DC put out. In the 80s, she was in a 12-issue maxi series. Then she had her own series for about 16 issues. And then Keith Giffen got his hands on the character because in the late 80s, Keith Giffen was everywhere, and he was like the golden boy for DC at that time. He got his hands on Amethyst for 4 issues and twisted her into the whole Lords of Order and Lords of Chaos with Dr. Fate and all that. And it was drawn by an artist named Esteban Maroto. And it's 4 issues. Esteban Maroto also did the Atlantis Chronicles 7 issues with Peter David that really fleshed out the whole backstory for Aquaman. So it was beautiful artwork, 4 issues. I remember selling it on eBay, went and bought the 4 issues again, sold again on eBay, went and bought the 4 issues again. I think I've probably owned about 3 or 4 sets of that miniseries at one point or another.
So what is it?
I don't know why I do it. Go ahead.
So why did you do that? Why acquire it, sell it, reacquire it, sell it? What caused you to go down that path?
Part of it's because I like that character a lot, and I like that miniseries. That miniseries is how. Did you read the JSA James Robinson, Jeff Johns series in the early 2000s?
Yes.
And that's one that had like Steven Sadowski on the art for a while. It brought Hawkman back. Well, in the first 4 issues, there was a character called Dark Lord. And Dark Lord would eventually become the Legion of Superheroes villain known as Mordru.
Right.
Well, the origin of Dark Lord as a Lord of Chaos agent takes place in that 4-issue Amethyst miniseries. And that's where you actually learn the origins of where Mordru comes from and, what his future will be, his destiny. So it's kind of fairly important to that character and to the Legion concept prior to Flashpoint. So I always feel like I need to own it. Yeah, and the other reason is to wrap it back up into conventions. I always see it at conventions. I tend to always come across that Amethyst 4-issue miniseries, and I go, oh, there it is again. I might as well buy it. It's 50 cents a piece. I'll buy it. Crazy.
Yeah, but Peter, why get rid of it in the first place?
You move as much as I used to move. I don't move so much anymore, but I used to move a lot. When you have to move 20 plus long boxes, it gets to be real tiring. And I'm not that strong, so I can carry 1 at a time. I can try to carry 2 at a time, but long boxes they're kind of awkward,
Yeah.
And then that's heavy. That's heavy, 600 books you're trying to carry out into a car. So I get to a point where I think to myself, I got to get rid of this. I can't keep doing this.
So are you getting and reading more digital comics these days or no?
No, for some reason, even though I sometimes yell about how many press releases they drop into my email, I still get the review copies from Image. Oh, it's all digital stuff, and you can't download it. Or I guess maybe you can download it. I never tried. I get them from Boom Studios as well, because I used to be on those lists when I used to produce Comic Geek Speak. So, they don't ever take you off those lists. So I still get those stuff. So that kind of stuff I'll read online. It's still not my favorite, but I'll read it. And then my local comic shop is really good about if I pick up stuff and then I come back like a week or 2 later and go, hey, can I trade this in for something else? Because they know that I do a lot of stuff online and podcasting, and I try to help them out with promotions, and they're just good friends. So I'm able to read a lot. It's almost like they're like my local library in a kind of way.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I spend a lot of money there. between them and between them and DCBS, I still spend money. But every now and then I'm like, you know what? I want to read this, but I really don't want to buy it on a continual basis. I just kind of want to read maybe like the first couple issues and then bring them back. And I don't stick them with. I don't wait like months so that they're stuck with like these back issues that they can't sell.
Mm-hmm.
So I just do that because it just that way I can read. It's almost as if they should just hire me because they wouldn't have to pay me. I would just sit there and read all day. But
have you ever worked in a comic book shop?
no, but I told this comic geek speak, the store that a lot of us grew up at was called Golden Eagle in Reading, PA, and it was run by a man named who passed away probably about 5 years now. And his first, well, the store that I used to go to, I don't know if it was his first one. And as a kid, me and my friends at that time, we were in junior high, I think. We used to go and help him pull books. I wasn't an employee. It was just something that he did. He let us do, and then he would give us a free poster or a couple free comics, that day. And we were like his little child labor. I'm sure if someone came by and said, "Hey, you can't do that. Those are kids," but whatever. We loved it. So no, I never really worked there on the retail side, but that was about the closest I came.
Yeah.
Would you want to work in a comic store? Do you think nowadays? Do you think it's?
Well, okay. So I actually many years ago apply to work at one of the local comic shops here, and one of the co-owners of the shop also owned a local bookstore as well. It was an indie bookstore here in town, and he saw my resume and said, "No, I want him to work at the bookstore." So I never got to work in the comic shop, which is probably a good thing because I became friends with a guy that works at another comic shop in Spokane called the Comic Book Shop. And just over the years, we've talked and interacted, and I ask him, every once in a while, about the business side of comics. And I let it slip one day that, I wanted to, he should hire me or something. And he's like, "No, you don't. You don't want to work here." And I think now that I don't really need to work at a comic book shop. I'll just enjoy them.
Right. And it's not, and some of it's not even about the customer. Some of it, some of it can be the horror stories from Diamond, of them shorting books or sending your package to the wrong place, or you try to order some back issue for a customer, a trade or whatever, and Diamond has it in stock, but they don't sell it unless 10 other comic stores also back order it, or something. It's something weird like that. I've heard of indie creators who say Diamond has our books, they just don't sell them through back orders because it has to reach a certain quota or something like that. And if just for that end of it, it seems like just a headache.
Yeah, I've also entertained the thought of, over the years that, hey, I can open up my own comic book shop, but then, better thoughts prevail, I guess, and I come to my senses.
Only if I hit the lottery. If I hit the lottery, then I'll open a store.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, I'd have to play the lottery first.
Right, exactly.
Well, Peter, unless you have anything else that you'd like to bring up.
Yeah, two things. I'll save the second one for later, but I wanted to ask how, I know last time I was on, you said your daughter was involved in the arts, and I just wanted to know, how was that going? Is, she's still in school? She's still on track with that?
Oh, yeah. In fact, this is her final semester. She actually is going to make it through college in 4 years, which was incredible. And she'll be getting her BFA in, I was going to say theater arts, but that's not right. Musical theater. is the actual thing. But a lot of the focus of her schooling, and this has been partially her choice, is in the vocal aspects of it. So she's developed into quite the me being her dad aside. She's developed into a really, really beautiful and strong singer. And like I said, it's not just me, because her professors are telling her how good she is and how much she's grown over these last 4 years. And so
That's great.
So now she's looking at the other side after she graduates and what she's going to do, and she also happens to have a boyfriend now, and they're pretty serious, yay! And so they're feeling the waters, and what's going to happen, and all that stuff that comes with icky relationships. And not that theirs is icky. I'm just being a dad here. He's actually a pretty good guy.
Right. It's a tricky time when you're just about ready to be sent off into the world. Colleges, especially for this program or this degree, can be great about the training aspect, and I think they could do better at developing awareness of exactly the options after college. Something very hands-on, and I don't even mean about finding work, but how about budgeting, because you're basically going out into the world as a freelance artist unless you land some really great careers. And there's a lot of things about that sometimes colleges forget to talk about. So there's a definite growth period after leaving school with this kind of degree, where you just really have to be open to everything, open to what it is you may want to do, open to working in the field, but maybe not necessarily in what you're strong at. Other options of looking at where you live and what's going on around you, and so it definitely is a tricky time.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that too. Brittany actually is contemplating those very things that you mentioned, and I agree with you. I don't think that the school here, while I do love the school, it's where I got my master's degree from, the University of Idaho. This particular program, I don't think that they have done a good enough job preparing her for post college stuff.
Right.
So I worry. And she does too. And I think right now her plan is to, once her boyfriend graduates, they both plan to go to probably the Portland area, because she's heard from her professors and other people that they brought in into classes and to interact with the students, people that actually have worked in theater and on TV and movies and stuff, that the Portland area is pretty good, pretty receptive, I should say, as far as new actors and other people wanting to get into that kind of business. So she's looking at that right now.
That's great. And I mean, I also, as an aside, Portland has a really comics community. So if she does move there, you can visit, and apparently there's a lot of comic cartoon artists there, creators.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Oh yeah, that reminds me that Portland is going to. I mean, not going to. They've done this already, but Emerald City Comic Con has partnered with the Rose City Comic Con in September. That's coming up in September, and so they're doing. I can't remember if it's their second or third show this year coming up. So I plan to go to that as well. So it'd be really interesting to see the difference between Emerald City and the Rose City one. That's just getting started.
Very cool.
Okay, shall we move on to talk about some comics?
Let's do it.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, Peter and I will be discussing Lazarus, by Greg Rucka, Michael Lark, and Santi Arcas, I believe. And then Rachel Rising by Mr. Terry Moore. And so Peter and I probably will be discussing particular details of these comics, so you are warned as far as spoilers go. So let's get started with Lazarus first, Peter. So this is something that is recent for you, isn't it, as far as getting to read this? If I remember correctly, you said something on Twitter about this.
Right, yeah. It was sort of brought to my attention in a 1, 2, 3 kind of punch kind of thing in a weird way. When it first came out, and the first issue came out last year, about June of last year, I think. And there's only been 5 issues to date. So the first issue came out, and my local retailer said, hey, you should check it out. It's pretty good. And I knew the creative team, Greg Rucka, I knew Michael Lark, and for some reason, I had a preconceived notion of what it was about, and I thought it skewed to the crime genre, for lack of a better phrase. So I don't necessarily go out of my way to read those kind of comics. So I was like, nah, I think I'll pass. It's all right. I didn't know much about it at all. And then the next time it sort of popped in my brain was when we were talking about what to talk about on this show, and you asked if I had read it, and I said no, and at that time, we weren't going to do it, but that at least made me go, let me just at least read what the first issue was about, and then I just read this super quick solicitation, and it still didn't sort of grab me, but at least it like put a drop in my brain, and then I went to a party with a bunch of comic people, and the one guy is a comic retailer, and he said, you should be reading Lazarus, and he started talking more about it in detail, and I said, okay, enough's enough. Obviously I need to read this. I got two retailers and a podcaster whose opinion I appreciate and listen to, so I got to read this, and that's when I emailed you, and I said, okay, let's do it. I'm going to read this, and that's my history. So don't prejudge books, because you never know.
That's
and
right.
I really just prejudged it because I thought Greg Rucka, I know he did Gotham Central. I thought it was going to be this procedural thing, and I was like, I don't really want to read that. But glad I did.
So how would you describe this book now? And have you read all 5 issues that have come out so far?
Yep. I'm all caught up. How would you describe it? Okay, so these are the kind of thoughts that pop into my brain sometimes that really probably make no sense, but it might help. It almost feels like, yeah, it's kind of weird to say this, but for one fleeting moment, I thought, wow, this sort of reminds me of Dune. Did you ever read Dune?
No, but I watched the movie.
Okay, so you have an understanding then. The whole he who whatever the quote is about. If you own the spice, you own everything, or whatever. I don't know. It's something like that, right? You control everything, and there's these families, and this is like a real world take of anything that any kind of geeky show like Game of Thrones, where a bunch of family, it's like Dynasty even. It's a bunch of families who control everything, right? They control the spice, if you want to say that. They control agriculture, and they control power. They've taken power from the government because they're not even the 1%. They're the 0.00001% of the wealthiest of the wealthy. And they've divided up the world into fiefdoms almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
they call their workers serfs, and they call the common people waste. And each house has one Lazarus, or one don't know if you bodyguard, for the lack of a better word, that they are artificially created, and we are following one of these Lazarus that belongs to a family that controls the majority of America, is what I sort of can take from the book. So that's like I don't know, a really loose description of the book.
I think that's pretty good. I didn't think of the Dune aspect of it, but yeah, that's a good analogy, I think.
Yeah, because he says in the back, if you read the text pages in the single issues, he talks about how he wanted something really sci-fi, but hard sci-fi, not laser guns and things like that, but science fiction where humanity is in a predicament, and how do you get out of that? And if you flip through the book casually, you may not get that aspect at all, because there are no ray guns and there are no floating cars. The tech is actually very low key, so it probably just looks like just a regular dystopian America, but there are some sci-fi elements to it, and I love sci-fi, and I like the way it's approaching it. So for that aspect, it starts to sink in.
Yeah, and the whole, like you said, that sci-fi aspect of being low key, that's very true. Until they start getting into, and they really haven't done this yet, but they've kind of teased a little bit about how Forever, who is the lead Lazarus, the character who we are following through the story, how she was created and how she is maintained, and that we get a lot of that, because they're called Lazarus for a reason, because Lazarus was the guy who came back from the dead in the Bible story, and so the very first issue, the very first scene is showing us Forever as we come to know her, or Eve. They nickname her Eve. I just call her Forever because I like that name. She gets shot up by these looters in this one facility, and she's dead. She looks like she's dead, but she comes back. She repairs. So it's kind of like oh gosh, what's there's a Valiant comic, Bloodshot. It reminded me of that, because he's a guy that is he has all these nanobots in his body that repairs the damage that's done to him, and so it's a little bit like that. And so, but we see Forever's physician, James, and that's how the comic opens. Number one. They're having a conversation after the fact of what we're seeing, after the events that we are being shown in those first few pages, and so, but he's talking to her and trying to get her talk to him about her feelings about the situation, while he's monitoring her and looking at the various reports, and we see that throughout the issues where her sister, and we should talk about the whole sibling thing. Her sister Beth is also helping James, the physician, monitor Forever's vitals and all that kind of stuff. And Beth seems to be, she feels protective in a way about Forever, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But so, do you want to talk about the sibling aspect of, and just the Carlisle family in general?
Yeah, let me say some things about the Lazarus thing too. So if there's anybody who hasn't read it, the other interesting thing about the Lazarus, at least in terms of Forever's case, is that she doesn't know what she is. They've told her that she is a daughter of the Carlisle family, and there are 3 daughters and 2 sons in this family, but she doesn't know what she is. She just assumes she's a biological daughter of the head of the family, and she's just been trained to be the master assassin or the heavy or whatever you want to look at it. So that sense of identity is something that she plays with, or I should say something that Greg Rucka is playing with, especially with the big reveal at the end of 4, or not, it's not a reveal, but the new little direction he takes it at the end of issue 4. where someone emails her and says, your father is not your father. He's not your father. This is not your family. So all of a sudden, that's now throwing doubt into her brain. So the Lazarus concept, which was shared amongst the families, it's going to be interesting to see if some of them do know their identities of who they really are. Is it just Forever that thinks that she's part of the family biologically? And we don't know really what she is just yet. She certainly looks biological, but and there's a lot of Greg Rucka fills in a lot of the backstory in the text pages with a lot of real world scientific things that are going on with stem cells and other kind of cells and creating livers and doing all this kind of stuff. He's showing that even though he's writing about I think we're set in 2064, I think is one of the dates I saw. Even though he's writing about the future is now. So again, that whole sci-fi aspect, the Isaac Asimov I, Robot thing, it feels like it's playing here heavily. And I like that. I like that about the Lazarus concept.
Yeah, and so we have, like I said, we have the Carlisle family, which is Forever's family, and I'm glad you brought that up about her, her being the daughter, but not really the daughter, and that's what I was alluding to with Beth, was that one of the younger brothers, Jonah, who gets into a bit of a predicament as we go along in the story, says something to the effect of Forever, says it out loud that she's not even Malcolm, who is the father, his real daughter. And Beth
Right.
just goes a little crazy on her brother and grabs a knife and is threatening to slice him up if he doesn't shut up.
Well, he also said, so the siblings are Jonah and Joanna, I think her name is.
Yes.
Yeah, they're twins. And then Beth and Steve. Beth works with James, the scientist, like you said, who is in charge of monitoring everything that goes on with the Lazarus. Steve, we don't really know too much about, except he's the eldest, I think, of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And in that fight scene, they were all called to come to Malcolm because someone broke into a Carlisle harvesting station, agricultural station, and Jonah is saying, well, it's one of our rival families. It's the Moraes down from, I think that was the name, from down in Mexico. He's pushing for this war between his family, and you sort of learn later that, was this fabricated to try to start a war or something. And so the father, Malcolm, calls all his kids in a very Shakespearean kind of way, and most of them go. And he's getting a sense of what his kids are up to in the kingdom. So that scene you're talking about, where the other siblings are told to go wait in the kitchen, Jonah also says something about, hey, if we lose Forever, you and James can just, knock boots and make another one. So I don't know how literal to take that, but did he just mean you can create one in another sort of Frankenstein way? You can create one. Is he poking fun at Beth for having a romantic relationship with James? Or maybe she just likes James and Jonah knows this. So there was something else to that conversation that hasn't come out yet that I'll be interested to find out what that means.
Exactly. So that's one of the things I love about this title, is that Rucka, gives you these little tidbits, these little nuggets of bits of information, and there's so much weight to those little bits that we haven't seen yet, or at
Right.
least that's how I'm taking it. But it's just, that's what I love this comic, because there's the characters just come forth almost fully realized, the first time that you meet them. And you're really only seeing a certain aspect of them within that particular scene, but there's just the way that they're shown, the way that the artist shows them, the way that the words that Rucka's putting in their mouths, they seem like they seem like realized characters instead of just ciphers for getting the plot moving, and I really appreciate
Right.
that.
Yeah, and it's a strength to Michael Lark, the artist, and his team. And I mean, he's taking on a lot of the art, but in some of the later issues, there's other names listed that I assume helped out with inking or coloring or something like that. But his style lends itself to this sort of gritty. Um, you just you feel like the atmosphere itself is just full of smoke and just dirty, and it would fit right along next to I don't know, something like Sons of Anarchy or some TV show that just is dirty, um, but and so it can get a little, you have to sort of get used to his characters and his art style, because you know he has detail, but he's really more interested, I think, in mood and setting, and it has some real world visuals to it. What I mean by this is, Lazarus Forever, she's mostly shown with a ponytail, and then when she takes her ponytail out, I kind of stop and go, oh wait, oh right, that's Forever, So he's not so detailed that they're making that everybody has a very distinct look. So he gives you visual cues. Jonah has long hair. Beth has blonde hair, but she usually keeps it up and she wears glasses. Whereas Joanna, the twin of Jonah, also has blonde hair, but she normally lets it loose. So it's kind of tricky, if he starts making Beth and Joanna look alike, it's not going to help us as readers because his style isn't quite that defined purposely, because he's it's the mood of the book is really important in the coloring. So those visual cues really help, because you could get, I think, I found I got a little bit lost every now and then.
Yeah, I think you're right. As far as the art goes, it's very much a sense of feeling as opposed to a distinctive look. So that so it helps bolster the mood that we're getting to enhance the story. At least I think so. And yeah, it is dirty. I like that description of it. But it fits the world perfectly. The dystopian future that we have is, you do not want to be waste, that's for sure. But even the family, the members of the family, have to live in this world. They may despise it like Jonah does, but they have to deal with it in various ways, and so it affects and infects everyone around, everyone involved in the story.
Right. It's you can almost transplant this story back to like the Dark Ages, and it's as if princes and princesses are walking through the common muck, and when members of the Carlisle, well, okay, so Jonah and Joanna are basically in charge with like the Los Angeles area, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where they hang their hat. And as they're driving through, there's one scene where Forever says, why haven't you built up these communities? And he says, why should we bother? It's the waste. They're not part of the family. They live off of, whatever it is that we provide. And, they're driving through these shanty towns in Hollywood. You see the Hollywood sign, it's all broken apart, and it's like those images in South America where there's just shack after shack after shack on the side of a hill, and that's what they're driving through, and it sort of made me think, that could be a prince and their knight in horse-drawn carriages going through the darkest of darkest villages where people are dying of cholera and whatever else. It really felt like that, and that sense really helps to push the notion that Greg Rucka is playing with. As I said, we look at it now as the 1% versus the 99%, but he's looking at it as the 0.0000001%, versus the 99.999999999%. And it's alive. I mean, even before I read the text pages, I thought, well, clearly this is, he's tying this into the real world goings on of, I guess what they're calling this, the new Gilded Age, the gap between the wealthiest of wealthy and the poorest of poor is getting bigger and bigger, and he's playing around with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I want to just comment a little bit about what you said about the like the middle age aspect of it. And then you pair that with the dichotomy that is the technology of this future place. And so in issue number 5, they bring in this family in Montana, these farmers or ranchers, and so they're in danger of being flooded. And so they use this comm unit, this computer portal to contact some people involved with the family, who are managing that area or whatever, and to say, we need assistance. If you don't help us, the river's going to flood and we're going to lose everything, lose the farm, lose their home, and they just, they end up leaving because otherwise they'll die. They come back the next morning, and the only thing standing where their house once was is this computer portal with a message saying, yes, we've looked over your contract and you're good. We'll have something out there in the morning, and it's too late. Right. But it's just, and here, it's just sitting there among all this destruction. And I think Rucka and the artists are definitely poking us in the eye, saying, look at this situation. Look the haves versus the have-nots, and these poor have-nots have it really bad.
Yeah. And it's not preachy. I don't want people to come away and think, oh, I don't want to read that because it's too preachy, depending on whatever side of the political aisle they fall on. It's not preachy at all. And it's not necessarily always the main point of his story. The book is called Lazarus. It's not called, 0.00001%. So, the story and the development, I imagine if you like, I don't know, if you like things like Blade Runner or Philip K. Dick or all of that is here. It's just really under the surface, and they chose to do that both in style and in art, because there's, he says he has a number of years that he wants to go on this book, and this is only the first 5 issues. So there's a lot to set up, and he does it well. In fact, I almost think after I read it, the 5 issues, I thought it almost jumped too quickly into the family drama and into the idea of her questioning her identity, because when you read those text pages in the back of the issue for the first 3 or 4 issues, there's this ongoing timeline going on that is catching you up to issue 1. Basically, it's setting the groundwork for everything that happened before issue 1. How these families took over the country, how the families created a treaty amongst themselves so they wouldn't always be at war, how the Lazarus program came about. I love it. I love that timeline. I even think it's, on some degree, for me, that's more the story that I want to read, I think. Because we're set into this world, and all of a sudden we're into conflict already. And I understand, you sort of have to do that in this day and age. You got to grab your readers early, because it's a hard sell. You're up against a lot of competition. So I almost think we jumped into the conflict a little too early. This would have, for me, I wonder what could have happened if this maybe was a second story or a third story. I don't. Did you feel any of that? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. I felt the same way, especially the whole reveal that, or whoever it is that's contacting forever. That little bit. I thought that came really fast. The bit with Jonah, setting this war up and then running away to safety. It seemed really rushed, but like you said, it seems to me that Rucka is just trying to get some of the best bits, if you will, out there to get people interested and reading and stay with it, and hopefully he'll be able to keep those people around and continue the story and maybe fill in a lot of the stuff that we're getting in those back matter pages. Because this story, I think, is very rich in the world that he's created, and you can tell so many different aspects of these stories. We don't even have to follow forever in every issue. There's just so many interesting characters and the backstories to them. We can even jump generations, and I think I would be very interested in seeing the early days of Malcolm Carlyle and how he built up his fortune and what happened with the catastrophe and everything that goes along with that. We can even follow the other Lazaruses involved.
Right.
I mean, we do get exposed to another Lazarus. This is the Moray Lazarus. What's his name? Joachim, yeah. And so you meet that other Lazarus, and he's a little different from Forever, I think. He talks specifically about the implants that he has, and so he can't eat particular kinds of food. I think it was a mango or something. I can't remember what it was. And at the end of issue 3, Jonah and Joanna try to blame the Moray family for killing the two Lazarus with a missile that they shoot from, I think it was a helicopter, but of course that doesn't work. It'd be a short series if that indeed worked. So Joachim and Forever fight these guys and report back, of course. But there's this so again there's this great scene between those two when Forever goes to the Moray family to deliver a message from her father, and she and Joachim have this discussion, and they have this connection. And at first it's just the fact that they're both Lazarus and what that means. Although we're not, we don't know exactly what that means. We can kind of guess based on what we've seen, but it's very clear that they feel that no one else understands what it is to be them.
Right.
And just the whole idea of there's just so many things to talk about this. Just the whole idea of the Lazarus and the way that they're genetically engineered and they're brought up to be, to take from kind of the Game of Thrones storyline, the hand of the king, in a way that they follow the orders, even though it's family. It's kind of weird that way, but I enjoy that aspect. But so Forever is obligated to do certain things that she does not want to do, and I don't know if that's because she is different in particular. So like in the first issue, she ends up killing this old man who says he's the traitor in the midst of that the Harvest One farming facility that you mentioned earlier. And she knows that he did not do it, but he's protecting his daughter and the rest of the people there because I think it was revealed eventually that it was Jonah that did this. But he's protecting all these people, and she has a conscience. And James, and I can't remember who he was talking to, maybe Beth at the moment, but they talk about Forever and how she is asking questions, and that's a bad thing.
Right.
And so I have to wonder, to tie it back into Joachim, does he have these same kinds of thoughts, or is it just her? And it's just, like I said, I keep saying this, but there's just the characters are so rich, the world is so rich, or the potential of the world is so rich that there's just so much that we could get into character-wise and story-wise. And this, like I said, this thing could go on for quite a while if we let it.
Right, by supporting the book, yeah. What you said about Joachim and his implants, when Forever is done meeting the head of the Moray family in Mexico, so she goes down to Mexico at her own father's request to meet with the head of the Moray family, because her father knows that his son Jonah is in cahoots with the Moray family, and he goes down, and Forever goes down, and she relays a message and says, "Look, you're going to give us this, this, and this, and we will give you this, this, and this, and in exchange, you will no longer have contact with Jonah, or else there will be a war, and you will not win it." And the head of the Moray family agrees, and that's what sets off Jonah and Joanna to come up with a scheme to try to kill Forever before she can get back, because they know that they're caught. In fact, Joanna knows that she's caught so bad that she actually makes it look like it was all Jonah's plan, and that makes Jonah go and flee that side of the country, and he goes to the east, apparently. So far, that's what we know. But in that missile strike, like you said, we see Joaquin come out of it, and his flesh is gone, and you see the implants underneath, and he's got the metal implants. And it's an interesting thing because they know they're different. I guess they don't know how different or how they're able to keep coming back from the dead. And certainly Joaquin is playing around with it by putting all these implants on himself. And you don't know how much they know about themselves, and that'll be an interesting reveal. And then that scene that you mentioned in issue 1, where she's going to kill the old man, execute him, and she says, you're innocent. I know you're innocent. Why are you doing this? And he says, I forget what his answer is, but Forever says, I'll tell your daughter that I love you. And he says to her, believe me, she already knows that I love her. Trust me, Miss Carlisle, she knows. Earlier on in the book, James and someone else were talking about, I think it's Jonah, that you have to show these Lazarus that you love them. You have to make sure that you keep putting in them that they're part of the family, or something could happen. And there's that look in her eye when she hears a father say, trust me, my daughter knows that I love her. Almost as if he's saying, do you know that your father loves you? And it's a tiny little moment, like you said, and it's way in issue 1, but it's already starting the whole identity thing going. And I thought that was a neat little moment.
And then it's expanded upon in issue number 5 when we get that flashback where Forever is much younger, and she's being trained by a woman in combat, and father shows up, and she runs up to him. They haven't seen each other in 5 months since her birthday. I think I don't know, Peter, she looks to me like she's maybe 9, 10-ish, maybe.
Right.
In that issue. And so she runs up to him and gives him a hug and is very excited, and he's very stoic and short with her and says, "Is that a way to greet your father?" And she's like, "I'm sorry, sir." And she, he had brought the family sword, which he asks her, "Do you know what this is?" And she says, "Yeah, that's the sword you promised me." And he's like, "No, that's the sword that you must earn. That's the family sword you must earn." And then tells her to defeat her trainer, and then the sword is hers. And of course she doesn't do that. And then he's very disappointed at her, and then says something about he's embarrassed that she's part of the family because of her failure. And so when like you said at the beginning of the series, they're counseling Jonah to show emotion, to show this connection to Forever, and yet the father is incapable of showing that. And every interaction that we see between the father and Forever is always very businesslike. Right. Even though he calls her daughter and refers to her as family, he certainly does not show it.
Right. Did you read the prelude? Do you know about the prelude to Lazarus?
No.
There's apparently on his website, and I only came across it today. I should have forwarded it to you. There's like a really short prelude on his website, and it's a conversation between James and Malcolm about that very thing, about loving your daughter. It doesn't go really deep. It's just, it sets up that whole thing about, you have to do this. You have to show that you love her. I'll have to send it to you. It just echoes on everything we're talking about, and it made me think by the end of these 5 issues and that short little prelude, um, it's one of the problems I have with not problems, but with some TV shows where everybody is bad and everybody's looking out for themselves and there's no goodness in any to be found anywhere, right? And sometimes that gets a little too one note for me. By the end of this, I wrote a note. I said, "Who's on her side in this family?" The Beth. I don't really think Beth is, because she said a couple times. James, I think, says, well, she thinks of you as a sister, and Beth says, oh, do you really think she's capable of that? I think Beth is a little jealous. Joanna certainly wanted her dead. Jonah wants her dead. Steve, we don't know too much about. The father is very cold to her. There is a mother, but we haven't seen her yet, so there's a little interesting, like, I don't know what's going to happen there. But in that one of the first issues, or the second issue, I think it was the second issue, the father says to Forever, I have all these kids, and yet you're the only one that is really like a true child to me. I forget what his exact words were.
Actually, Peter, I think, hold on, let me look at that, because when I
Yeah.
reread that, because I thought the same thing, but when I reread it, it seemed like he does say that there's only one child that's basically worth a damn in the family. I think the implication was that she's supposed to think he's referring to her, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case.
Okay.
Which I thought was a very interesting piece of manipulation on his part.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, and again, it all goes back to this question. Nobody seems like they're on her side, and that's a little frustrating because, and I get it. That's the point. If I had to speculate, obviously it feels like at some point she may go up against the family. Maybe all the Lazarus, maybe they all will rise up against their own family, because Ford was when she was in Los Angeles, she could tell that the waste were being downtrodden, and that it feels like she has more of a conscience than her own family does. And that's very much in the style of this kind of story, where there's usually one outsider that can see everything that's going on, or an individual who's stuck in the middle, and it's up to them to rise above it. Look at the Hunger Games, right? This character from a very poor district, and she causes the fire that brings about all the revolt. So to me, it feels a little too heavy on that side of it, which made that scene between her and Joaquin really nice. Because here's another Lazarus that we thought they maybe would just fight each other, but they didn't. They're actually flirting with each other. And it was a nice little break, and it was nice to see Forever smile. But
well, yeah, and also when they are both coming back to Carlisle territory, because Joaquin is escorting her there, he indicates to her, let's pull over, and she's like, is there something wrong? He's like, no, let's watch the sunset. And she, that again, like you said, that's exactly, it was a nice little moment between them, and also to contrast to the dark reality that is the rest of that world. So
right.
I do wonder though, so speaking of, who's on her side, we have the mysterious messenger telling her, your family's not your family. And then I have to wonder, since they were featured so prevalently in issue 5, that family in Montana, because it wasn't just, because the artist is you see a lot of stuff in the background and how things are, and so you get a real good sense of what this world is like just by what's going on in the panels in the background. But they spent, I don't know, 4, 5, maybe 6 pages in issue 5 on that family in Montana. So I have to wonder is what's going on with that? How much of a part of the story are they going to play, as of course, especially to Forever, or with Forever,
or with Jonah. I wondered if maybe Jonah was going to wind up in that part of town, because they found his vehicle down in was it Mississippi or was it just against the Mississippi River? I forget
I think
where.
yeah.
So I'd have to look again because that could, the Mississippi is certainly long enough that he could be anywhere along the Mississippi. So I didn't know. Yeah, that, and I think he also just wanted to show, Greg Rucka wanted to show another part of the world and what was going on, and the first four issues are its own story arc, and then five kicks off a new one. So we're sort of left hanging right now because there hasn't been any new issue yet. But yeah, I'm interested to see what becomes of that family, and it was also interesting to see the exchange when they were on the different sides of the river. The other side belonged to the other family, the Bittner Hawk family. And Hawk used to actually be with Carlisle or something like that, according to the timeline
Hmm.
in the back. And clearly that side of the country isn't as strong as the Carlisle family. And, you sort of wonder, wow, what's going on there? And the Moray family is down in Mexico. But when they listed how many people were in that particular town anyway, it was one family member, 22 serfs, and 12,000 plus waste, which wasn't a lot compared to some of the ones that were going on in the West Coast, where it was like 3 million waste or something like that. So the breakup of the world, I would love to see a map of the world.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact
Uh,
same thing.
just a breakdown would be cool, and that adds to that whole sci-fi element or that fantasy element, the dividing up a world and who owns what and where are you going to go. And there was a book by Frank Miller and Dave Gibbons called Martha Washington.
Hmm.
The character was Martha Washington. I forget what the rest of the title was. And they did the same thing where the country was divided up into different sections because of radiation or something like that. Um, so I have to imagine if you're a fan of any of that kind of stuff that we've been talking about outside of this book or 2000 AD or something like that, you might really enjoy this.
Yeah, and so just one last thing, I think, unless you have more to talk about, Peter. Uh, in issue number 5, there's the interaction with Forever and the people on the other side of the river with the Bittner Hawk coalition,
Hmm.
where they're taunting each other back. Well, I guess it's more them taunting Forever, but then she turns around and one of the guys shoots her in the back, and her guys, the Carlisle military guys, are like, okay, let's. They're about ready to go to, charge the river and take them out, which of course would start a war. And she's like, no, stand down. And then has this great monologue where basically, one of you cowards shot me in the back. However, and this means war. If it was an order, if someone told you to do this, that means our families go to war. However, if you acted alone and you guys do something about it, then she considers the matter settled. And so then there's this 3-panel scene where there's these guys just kind of stand there and they all start looking at this one guy, and he's like, oh, come on. I'm one of you. And then there's gunfire in the next panel showing Forever and the captain of the guard there. And they kill him. It's amazing the power that she has over another family because of this threat of war constantly between these factions. And so yeah,
Right.
it's very much like you mentioned something about the Middle Ages and we've referenced Game of Thrones. It's very much that, and Shakespearean for that matter. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's very Shakespearean and kingdoms and fiefdoms and all that kind of stuff. It's really really cool stuff. Yeah.
And even to bring it into to bring it to something a little more current. I mean, it's Godfather, right? It's the Godfather movies.
Yeah.
It's families coming together and capos and all the I don't know the terminologies, but it's the families all have similar structures, and some are more powerful than the other, and they control the world, and you don't want to mess with this family. It's all of that stuff, and yet it's all surfacey and not surfacey. It kind of plays underneath the story, which is nice. It doesn't necessarily hit you over the head with it all the time. It's there underneath, through characterization and interaction, dialogue, with some really some of the artwork when you get some close up of faces and eyes. So it's good. It's everything that you and the two comic retailers that told me when they said to read it, I should have trusted all your instincts, because it is quality stuff.
And this was a comic that I remember going back to Comic-Cons in Emerald City when they announced it. I'm not sure if Emerald City was the first announcement of this book, but it was the first time I'd heard of it. And so I was in the image panel there a couple of years ago, and they brought up that image, which is the cover image of this book, and I think Rucka was there talking about it. I'm pretty sure he was, and so he was giving us the elevator pitch for the comic, and that was one of the ones, and I wrote down all the books that Image and other companies were talking about that were coming out, and that's the only one that I can remember specifically out of all the stuff. For some reason, that image and his description just stuck with me. And so when it finally came out, I was like, yes, so finally get to read the story.
Yeah. I mean, he's there's no question. Greg Rucka is a really great writer. I haven't read nearly enough of his stuff. I've probably read more of his superhero stuff than anything else. But he's also a novelist as well. So he has good pacing, and he knows to develop characters, and if he's putting some characters out there and hiding other ones, he's probably doing it for a reason. And it'll come out later. So I look forward to the journey.
As do I. So Peter, anything else about Lazarus we should touch on before we move on?
Yeah, before we go, looking back at Lazarus, our talk on Lazarus and those text pages and that timeline that was that they were spitting out at the back there, and some interesting factoids about everything that led up to Lazarus #1. I was reminded of that same usage in one of our favorite Legion eras, the 5 years later Legion stuff, where a lot of the text pages in the back were all about things leading up to the economic crisis. I mean, it's interesting how reflective that is to Lazarus. And if you ever owned the Legion source book for the role-playing games called, I think it was 2995. It was the Legion of Superheroes 2995 source book. It gave a huge backdrop to that 5 years later Legion stuff. It gave timelines. It gave some correspondence stuff that they created for that game, for that role-playing version. I never role-played, but I bought the book anyway because it was so stuffed with information. And it just reminded me of all that stuff. And I know you have a fondness for that era. And we talked about possibly taking a look at that in a podcast venture together. So I just wanted to, I think that would be neat, because I think it's a wealth of information. And I think you and I would do a great job on sort of, going through it issue by issue and just saying, hey, that'd be great. So I know I emailed you and I said at some point we should get together and do that. I have no idea when, but because I still want to try to read as much Legion prior to that before we would do such a thing. But I just wanted to just to sort of put it out there that I haven't forgotten about it. It's but I think it would be a fascinating way to look at that era.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome. That's you and I have talked about this through Twitter and email before, but the 5 year later Legion is one of my favorite runs of that entire series. Although, and this is probably a good thing because to be talking about this, I've been reading some stuff from people that. I've been reading some stuff from people online, basically kind of, what do I want to say here? Not being very favorable towards the 5 year later Legion run. And I want to put a stop to that.
Right.
Because it deserves some accolades for what it accomplished.
Yeah. I mean, it was ahead of its time in terms of the way Keith Giffen told the storytelling. If you were a fan of 52, this 5 years later, Legion stuff came out in 1989, I think was the first issue. I mean, or 1990 or somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was dense, and yeah, you probably did have to know some stuff about Legion, but to which I say, look, you either sink or swim, I mean, some comics, not all comics have to be dumbed down or averaged out so that everybody can understand them. I mean, they can, if you're willing to try some new things, and it was very popular at the time and controversial. But I also know a lot of creators who also really like it
mm-hmm.
and think it was a very smart book and a very deep book. And I've always been meaning to read it again. I've read it a bunch of times, but it's been a number of years and I want to look back on it again. And, it does take a lot of foreknowledge, which is why I'm trying to read earlier Legion stuff before it, especially the stuff that I haven't read. There are some Legion stories I haven't read. So I look forward to hopefully be able to do that. And connecting that too, once I get the tower back up, I know you're a big New Teen Titans fan. So if I ever get a Skype set up, we'll have to switch roles and I'll bring you on that show and we can talk some Titan stuff.
Excellent. I would love that.
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to stop the episode right there because the conversation with Peter continues on in a future episode where we discuss Rachel Rising. So come back for that. But before I go, I want to remind everyone that Travis and I will be doing the Long Box Review Best of 2013 episode here very soon. The plan is to do this on February 9th. It's a Sunday morning, and we'll be doing it on Google Hangouts. If you would like to submit your nominees for the following categories, you may do so by sending email to longboxreview@gmail.com. That'd probably be the easiest way to do that. And here are the categories. I would like to know what your favorite ongoing comic is, your favorite limited series, your favorite single issue of a title, one-shot, or a trade, either one of those. Your favorite artist, and this can be a penciler, inker, colorist, however you define artist is fine. Favorite writer, favorite cover, favorite new character, and this could be a hero, villain, or anything in between that. Your favorite moment in the comics that came out in 2013. And also, you can submit nominees for your most missed, sleeper surprise hit, canceled before its time, and then finally, most anticipated for 2014. Again, you can send those nominations to longboxreview@gmail.com, and I would love to hear from you. That way I can read these on the air live come Sunday, February 9th. If you'd like to leave feedback on this particular episode with Peter and our discussion about Lazarus, you can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. Leave voicemail at 208-953-1841. Longbox Review is a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network, and you can also find the Longbox Review podcast on Stitcher. Thanks for listening.